Doctors had already given up. Machines beeped slowly in a cold hospital room. A billionaire CEO, once the most powerful man in the city, was now fighting his final battle. His empire stood still, his family in tears. And the world believed this was the end. No treatment worked, no donor matched. Hope was gone, but then, someone no one expected stepped in. A girl who had nothing, no money, no home, no family walked into his life. And with nothing but her blood, she gave him back everything. Life, love, and a second chance. In this video, you'll discover how a homeless girl became the miracle no doctor could create. Why her blood was so rare, and how her act of kindness changed not just a man's fate, but her own. Stay with us till the end, because the twist will leave you speechless. Before we talk about the miracle that changed everything, let's step back. To truly understand the story, we must first know the man at the center of it all, the CEO. He was not just a man of money, he was a symbol of power. His name appeared in the headlines, his face on magazine covers, and his signature could move millions of dollars in an instant. People in the city called him the Iron Hand in a velvet glove. He built his empire from nothing, rising from a modest background to control industries that touched every home: technology, real estate, banking. At his peak, he was worth billions, but his wealth was more than numbers. His influence stretched across governments, charities, and even international markets. If he spoke, markets shifted. If he moved, competitors shook. But wealth often comes with a cost. Behind the glass towers and luxury cars, he carried a burden. A body that looked strong on the outside was fighting a hidden battle on the inside. At first, it was small fatigue, headaches, nights when his chest felt heavy. He ignored it. Like every powerful man, he believed he was untouchable. Doctors advised rest, but he laughed it off. Time is money, he would say, and he had no time to lose. Until one evening, in the middle of a conference, his body betrayed him. His speech slurred, his legs weakened, and in front of the cameras, the man who never bowed to anyone collapsed on the stage. The news spread instantly. CEO rushed to hospital, his employees panicked, investors pulled back, and the media whispered words no one dared to say aloud: death. Inside the hospital, his life hung by a thread. The diagnosis was grim. A rare condition in his blood had poisoned his system. Without immediate treatment, without a perfect donor match, he would not survive. The medical team worked around the clock. The city's best specialists gathered at his bedside. Every machine beeped in rhythm with his fragile heartbeat. They tried transfusions, they tried drugs, they searched through every database for a donor who could save him, but the result was the same: failure. Each hour brought disappointment, each attempt ended in silence. The doctors, who had once saved thousands, found themselves helpless. His blood type was not just rare, it was nearly impossible to find. Meanwhile, outside those hospital walls, the world trembled. His company, a giant with branches across continents, faced collapse. Investors feared bankruptcy. Tens of thousands of employees feared losing their jobs. His family, who had always seen him as indestructible, now clung to hope that kept slipping through their fingers. For them, this wasn't just about saving a man, it was about saving a legacy. If he died, entire businesses would fall, families would suffer, and the empire he built with sweat and vision would crumble into dust. The once invincible CEO was now just a fragile body in a hospital bed. She had no last name that people remembered, no address to call her own. She was known only as the girl with tired eyes by those who passed her on the streets. For most, she was invisible, just another face hidden beneath the weight of survival. But inside her was a strength that even she did not fully know. Her life had not always been this way. She was born into an ordinary family. A small home, simple meals, laughter shared under dim lights. But fate has a cruel way of turning happiness into ashes. A sudden tragedy: her parents taken by illness, debts piling high, relatives unwilling to take her in. One by one, the walls around her collapsed until nothing remained. At first, she worked, cleaning houses, washing dishes, anything to survive. But life is not gentle to the powerless. Employers underpaid her. Some abused her trust, others simply discarded her when she was no longer useful. And so, she drifted into the streets. A blanket became her shelter, a cardboard box, her bed. Food came from bins behind restaurants or from the kindness of strangers who dropped coins into her hands without even looking her in the eye. She was young, but hardship carved years onto her face. Yet, despite all this, she carried something rare. A spirit that refused to die. Where others cursed life, she whispered gratitude. Where others begged, she tried to work. She never touched crime, never stole, never deceived, because she believed that even if the world had abandoned her, she would not abandon her own humanity. Each day began with the same ritual. She would rise with the sun, wash her face at a public fountain, and braid her hair neatly. She wanted dignity, even if she had no home. Then she would walk the streets, looking for small jobs, carrying groceries, sweeping steps, watching over children for an hour in exchange for a meal. Some days brought work, most days brought rejection. And yet, she smiled because she believed tomorrow might be better. Her dream was not wealth, not luxury. It was simple, a bed of her own, a door that could lock, a place where she could sleep without fear of the cold. But the world never gave her what she asked. Instead, it gave her tests, hunger that twisted her stomach, nights where rain soaked through her thin clothes, people who looked through her as if she was nothing, and yet, she walked forward. It was this resilience that carried her to the moment when her path crossed with his. One evening, as the city buzzed with life, she was searching near the hospital dumpsters for leftover bread. Her hands were trembling from hunger, but her spirit was still calm. That's when she saw chaos at the hospital gate. Flashing lights, shouting voices, cameras everywhere. She paused, curious, as stretchers were rushed inside. She didn't know the man on the stretcher was the city's most powerful CEO. She didn't know his life was hanging by a thread. She didn't know the crowd that had gathered outside was filled with reporters hungry for headlines. But she knew suffering when she saw it, and something inside her pulled her closer. She whispered to herself, "Someone is fighting for their life tonight." Little did she know, destiny was quietly arranging the impossible. Because in her veins flowed the blood that no one else could give. Before we talk about the miracle itself, let's go inside that hospital room. Let's see the atmosphere in the hours when hope was almost gone. The CEO lay motionless, surrounded by blinking monitors and doctors who had exhausted every option. His family stood behind the glass, praying silently, tears rolling down their faces. The media outside was already preparing headlines. Investors whispered about succession. Employees checked their emails in fear. The city was holding its breath. Inside, the doctors reviewed the charts again and again. They had tried transfusions from rare donors. They had imported blood from overseas. They had tested matches from hundreds of volunteers. Each time, the same result. The body rejected it violently. His immune system, already weak, could not accept any foreign help. Every attempt ended with alarms, with crashes, with that haunting flatline that made nurses cry. One senior doctor finally whispered, "We've done everything. There is nothing left." Heads lowered, hope was buried. But destiny does not always follow science. At that exact time, the homeless girl was still sitting quietly in the corner of the waiting area. She had not come for herself. She had come because she had seen the chaos outside and, for reasons she couldn't explain, she wanted to pray for whoever was inside. She looked fragile, clothes worn thin, hair messy, eyes tired, but inside her veins flowed something the world had been searching for. When the doctors announced that the only chance was a donor with an impossibly rare type of blood, a nurse looked around the hall filled with volunteers. Dozens had already tried and failed. The nurse almost didn't bother asking her. But something about her presence caught attention. "Would you like to be tested?" the nurse asked gently. She hesitated. Nobody had ever asked her for anything before. She was used to giving only scraps of herself to survive, but she nodded, yes. The test was quick. A small vial of blood, a rushed analysis. The doctors didn't expect anything. They had already given up. But when the machine beeped and the results flashed on the screen, silence filled the lab. Then, gasps, "It's a match," one doctor whispered. "Not just a match, it's the perfect compatibility we've been searching for." The room exploded in urgency. Nurses ran, papers flew, orders shouted. For the first time in days, there was a spark of hope. They rushed back to her. "Your blood, it's rare. It's exactly what we need. Will you help us save him?" Her eyes widened. She had nothing, no wealth, no security, no reason to trust people who had always ignored her. But in her heart, she knew, if someone's life depended on her, she could not say no. "I will," she whispered. And so, she was prepared. The procedure began. As her blood flowed into the CEO's veins, the monitors watched carefully. Everyone waited. Seconds felt like hours. The first transfusion in days that did not trigger rejection. His body accepted it. His heart began to stabilize. Oxygen levels climbed. The beeping of the machines turned steady, strong, alive. Doctors looked at each other in disbelief. "It's working," one cried out. "It's finally working." Tears of relief filled the eyes of nurses who had been on shift for days. Family members who had been hopeless suddenly fell to their knees in gratitude. The homeless girl lay quietly on her bed, her face pale from donation, but her lips carried a small smile. She had no idea she had just performed the impossible. For the first time in weeks, the CEO's life was no longer slipping away. His skin regained color, his breathing grew steadier, his pulse stronger. It was as if her blood carried not just cells, but strength, spirit, and life itself. The doctors wrote in their reports, all previous donors failed, only her blood shows compatibility. Patient responding positively. In that moment, the hospital that had been filled with despair now echoed with hope. The billionaire who had everything was saved by the girl who had nothing. Before we talk about the bond that would grow between them, we must face the storm that came right after the miracle. The doctors had witnessed the impossible. The CEO was alive, his body responding, his vitals steady. The family celebrated, investors sighed in relief, and the media declared it a miracle. But miracles, as history shows, are often followed by doubt. And the girl who had given her blood was not greeted with applause, but with suspicion. At first, it was quiet whispers in the hospital corridors. "Who is she? How can a homeless girl be the one to save him when no one else could? What if there is something wrong with her?" The doctors, though grateful, hesitated to accept her fully. They reviewed her medical records, questioned her about diseases, dug into her past. They treated her not as a savior, but as a risk. Some even whispered that the compatibility was too strange, almost unbelievable. The family, too, was divided. His wife, elegant and sharp, looked at the girl with narrowed eyes. "Why her?" she demanded. "Why did it have to be someone like this?" To her, the girl represented shame, an intruder from the streets entering their world of wealth and reputation. The board members of his company, hearing the news, spun the story differently. "This will damage our image," they warned. "Do we want the media to know that a billionaire's life was saved by a beggar? It makes him look weak, dependent, less than untouchable." They saw her not as a savior, but as a threat to their carefully polished brand. Even outside, the press twisted the story. Reporters shouted, "Is this a scandal? A cover-up? Who is this mysterious girl?" Paparazzi followed her, taking pictures of her ragged clothes, mocking her face, turning her sacrifice into gossip. And yet, she remained silent. She had never asked for recognition. She had never demanded gratitude. She had given her blood because it was right, not because it would bring her anything. But silence is often mistaken for weakness. And so the world underestimated her. They mocked her. Nurses whispered insults under their breath. Guards watched her closely, as if she might steal something. Guests at the hospital cafeteria avoided her, covering their noses as if poverty was a disease. Every stare reminded her that even after saving a billionaire, she was still just a homeless girl. But the truth has a way of surfacing. One night, as the CEO slept and his body fought to heal, the doctors discovered something hidden in her medical files. A forgotten record from years ago, a detail that changed everything. Her blood type wasn't just rare, it carried a genetic marker connected to his own family line. Whispers turned to gasps. Was it possible? Could this girl, who had grown up on the streets, be tied by blood to the man she had just saved? The family resisted the idea. "Impossible," they said. "We would have known," but the doctors couldn't deny the evidence. She shared a rare marker that could only come from close relation. The mystery deepened, and slowly, the pieces of her past began to fall into place. Memories she had buried surfaced, her mother whispering about a man she once loved, a man of wealth and power who disappeared from their lives without a word. Could it be? Could the man in the hospital bed be more than a stranger? Could he be the father she never knew? The revelation shook her. For years, she had lived believing she was utterly alone. For years, she had begged, starved, suffered while he lived in towers of glass, unaware that she even existed. Anger, grief, and confusion battled in her heart. The CEO, when he finally woke, listened in silence as the truth reached his ears. At first, he rejected it. No. I never knew. But as he looked at her face, the eyes that mirrored his own, the strength that echoed his spirit, realization struck him. She had saved him with her blood, but in doing so, she had also revealed the deepest wound of his life, the child he had lost to the shadows of time and neglect. The revelation broke him more than the illness ever had. He realized that his empire, his billions, his power, none of it had mattered. Because all along, a piece of his own flesh and blood had been abandoned to suffer in the cold. And she, the one the world mocked, had saved not only his life, but also his soul. Before we talk about what happened after the storm, let us step into that quiet moment. The moment when his eyes finally opened, the hospital room was still. Machines hummed softly, the air heavy with both fear and hope. For days, he had hovered between life and death, his chest rising and falling only because of the machines that kept him breathing. Family members sat in exhaustion, doctors reviewed charts with worried eyes, and the homeless girl, his unlikely savior, remained in the shadows, unnoticed, forgotten after giving all that she had. And then it happened, a faint twitch in his fingers. A long breath escaping his lips, his eyelids fluttered, struggling against the weight of sleep and suffering. Slowly, painfully, the billionaire CEO opened his eyes. The room froze. Nurses rushed forward, doctors checked the monitors, family members gasped. He was awake. His gaze wandered, confused at first, the ceiling lights blinded him, voices blurred together. But as clarity returned, so did his memory. He remembered collapsing, the darkness swallowing him, the feeling of death closing in, and now, he was alive. He should not have been alive. Something had changed. He whispered with a cracked voice, "How am I here?" The doctors leaned close. "It was a miracle," one said. "A rare blood donor saved you." His eyes narrowed. "Who?" And in that moment, they pointed not to his family, not to his business partners, but toward the corner of the room. She stood there, small, frail, wearing clothes that spoke of struggle, not wealth. Her head bowed, hands clenched nervously. She did not look like a hero. She looked like someone who did not belong in that room at all. For a moment, silence ruled. He stared at her. She shifted uncomfortably, as if ready to be pushed away. She expected rejection because that was all she had ever known. But instead, he spoke softly, "You saved me." She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper, "Yes, my blood." It matched. Tears formed in his eyes. A man who had commanded empires now brought low by gratitude. "Why would you do this?" "For me." Her answer was simple, "Because you needed it. And I had it added to give." That humility pierced him deeper than any illness ever had. He had built a life where nothing came without a price, where deals were signed with conditions, where kindness was often a mask for ambition. Yet here stood a girl who had nothing, who had been given nothing by the world, and still, she had given freely. For the first time in his life, he saw her not as a beggar, not as a stranger, but as a person. A person with more dignity in her suffering than he had ever shown in his wealth. But the world around them was not ready to accept this bond. His wife cleared her throat sharply. "Darling, don't be deceived, she is not one of us." Her words carried disdain, as though the girl's poverty was a crime. The board members echoed the same concern. "Sir, this could damage your reputation." Imagine the headlines: "A billionaire saved by a street girl." It makes you vulnerable, weak. We must control this narrative. The doctors, too, while grateful, whispered about risks. What if her blood carries something we missed? What if long-term complications arise? Everywhere she turned, there was doubt, skepticism, prejudice. And yet, he silenced them all with a single sentence. "She gave me life when none of you could. Don't you dare speak of her as less." His words shook the room. The balance of power shifted. For once, the billionaire was not defending his empire, but defending the girl who had saved him. But even then, the conflict was not so easily erased. Between them stood an invisible wall, the wall of class, of reputation, of doubt. She could not imagine being close to a man like him. He could not imagine letting her go back to the streets. Their hearts pulled toward each other, but their worlds pushed them apart. He reached out a trembling hand. "Stay, please. I need to thank you properly." She shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. I didn't save you for a reward." "Then why?" he asked. She looked at him with quiet strength. "Because your life mattered. And even if no one sees me, I wanted to matter, too." Those words struck him like thunder. He realized that she had given him more than blood. She had given him truth. She had shown him that life was not measured by wealth or power, but by the courage to give when you have nothing. And in that moment, their eyes locked, not as billionaire and beggar, not as savior and saved, but as to souls recognizing each other in the deepest silence. Before we end this story, let's look at what happened after the miracle. The CEO did not forget the girl who saved him. Instead, he used his wealth and influence to change her life, giving her not charity, but opportunity. For the first time, she had a home, education, and dignity. She forgave the world that had once abandoned her, and she grew stronger, not defined by her past, but inspired by it. And the CEO, he became more than just a man of power. He became a man of purpose, learning that miracles often come from the most unexpected places. She had nothing, but she gave him everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories.